What can you expect when you join the business world for the first time and go out on your own? What can it look like to go from not being in the business world to becoming an entrepreneur later in life and having an idea that you say, you know what, can I make some money off this? That's exactly the story of Brad Norwood, who was a teacher who became the founder of Dream It Pro. And I got to tell you, he's one of my all-time favorite guests. We talk about the journey of entrepreneurship. We talk about the wonder of sales and making sales not feel so icky, and why Brad and I love this Northwest Arkansas area. This is an incredible episode. You're going to love it. Before we dive in, though, we got a word from one of the sponsors of the show. Don't forget, you can also support the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. I appreciate all those who keep the podcast going, and talk to you in a minute. There's one single piece of advice that I give to business owners who are ready to scale their business drastically. And that's knowing exactly what you need to hand off so that you can continue focusing on what you're an expert in. It amazes me when I talk to business owners who are doing their own bookkeeping and tax prep, and worse, that they're going through all this paperwork at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, even midnight, slaving away trying to make sense of all of the numbers for their business. Business owners who are making it happen have already figured out that you can't do it all yourself. That's why I recommend Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions. Not only is he an expert in bookkeeping and tax prep, but what I love about Steve is that he'll sit down with you and help you make sense of the value of your business beyond just reading a spreadsheet. You'll be able to make better decisions, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself the crucial time you would have spent going through QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is that keeps us up late at night. So save yourself some time and some money by giving Steve Lay a call at Equity Business Solutions, and he'll show you the value beyond your numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutionsllc.com to find out more. All right, Brad, great to have you on the show today.
And I'm glad to be here.
Man, I feel like this has been a long time coming. We have so many mutual connections, but we didn't finally grab a cup of coffee. Well, you don't drink coffee.
Right.
We didn't finally sit down until a few weeks ago.
Right.
And it feels like it should have happened way earlier.
It's like we've known each other forever through other people.
Yeah.
A little bit weird. I always tell people these days, when I grew up, I'm 44. You're not far behind. You never wanted to hear that anybody was online dating, right? Like, whoa, don't go meet them.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And in today's world, online dating, so to speak, LinkedIn has changed my life. It's unbelievable.
And what's funny about LinkedIn is how small the world feels now, in that you're only like a connection. It's like the 6 degrees of separation. Have you heard this Kevin Bacon spin on it, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
I live under a rock. So someone shared with me the other day. They were like, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. And I was like, it's separation, right? And then he had to explain the whole thing, and it wasn't funny at that point.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like how you're literally one connection away from like some of these like mega successful business people.
Right. Yeah. And you're one of those people too.
No, I'm not. I'm definitely small scale.
We go all the way back to a good friend of ours, Brian Sexton.
Yeah.
Look at the connection there, and, Jason Jenkins, Mike Dooley, the list goes on and on.
Yeah. I've really liked LinkedIn because of, you mentioned Brian Sexton, but I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but when you're running your own business, you just don't have the same conversations that you had when you worked with someone. Like you don't have like the water cooler talk.
Yeah.
And so in a way, LinkedIn's kind of like that space of where, I called Brian the other day and said, hey, I need some help. Help me think this through, this decision I'm making.
Sure.
And we just batted some ideas, some sales ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
That, if I'd never met Brian through LinkedIn, I never would have had that.
And he's so good at that.
He is.
People buy from people, his book.
Yeah.
Shout out, if you haven't read that book, go read that book. People buy from people by Brian Sexton. But connection, man. He talks about connection, and Big Sexy does that all the time.
So tell me, the listeners, they've heard the intro to this episode. So they heard my spiel about how amazing you are. Give us like the quick and dirty on who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm Brad Norwood, and first, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a lover of Jesus Christ, but I'm crazy. I like to take the gamble, and
you're aggressive.
I'm very aggressive.
You're a risk taker.
I bet on the come all the time.
Yeah.
My wife wants to shoot me probably 8 days a week. But I'm a risk taker. Love to do it.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Did you always have like this spirit, like this entrepreneurial spirit?
I did, but I didn't know it.
Yeah. Okay.
I taught school for 13 years. I was in a juvenile detention center.
Yeah.
I had a captive audience, no pun intended. And it was the only way I could teach. But when I was there, I realized that I didn't really want to teach these kids how to read, how to do math, school things. The kids that I was teaching didn't want to learn that either.
Yeah.
And so, again, to use Brian's words, the connection is what I was after. And if we could just plant the seeds with these kids, the Holy Spirit would water them. Let's see where they go. But I found out after 13 years, it was really in year 11, 12, and then 13, that I came to the realization you never see those kids again unless they came back. And very rarely did they come knock on the door and say, hey, thank you, I've changed. We had a couple of those, but I would see them at a McDonald's drive-thru or Wendy's drive-thru, something like that, and then I'd be like, oh, no, run, right? Because they're going to spit in my food.
Yeah.
And so I never got to hear from them again unless they were down in the dumps, and it just it wore me out. It was a burnout deal.
It doesn't do it justice to say it's a thankless profession, because I was a teacher too,
right?
But and I don't want to say it's a fruitless profession,
right?
Because you're building fruit, like you're developing that, but you don't always see the fruit.
You don't always get to see it,
right?
Yeah, and it's so hard to plant for the harvest and never be able to partake in the harvest. But again, a few times I was able to. But what happened is when I realized it, I took a golf trip one summer. I'm an avid golfer, love to play golf. I'm not very good, but I love to play. And I took 12 guys out to Las Vegas on a golf trip. And I used a company online that I found, VIP Golf Services in Las Vegas, and they coordinated everything for us. And it took me back to my hospitality roots. That's what I went to school for. And in that, they planned everything for the trip. Well, when we got back, all 12 guys called me, and they're like, Brad, you did awesome. And I was like, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
All I did was call these guys, and they did it.
Yeah.
So I called Justin at VIP, and I said, look, this call equals 12 phone calls. It was an awesome trip. By the way, how do you do this and make money?
Yeah.
And we got in a conversation, and he shared his business plan with me. I promised to never compete against him. Every time I've ever sold Las Vegas golf, I book it directly through him.
It's parking there for a second. It's cool that he was so willing.
He was so open.
Like, isn't that, and I feel like that's what you and I really resonate with these people on LinkedIn, is these people who've been in business longer. I think of like Dale Dupree, for example, who we both adore. Dale Dupree.
Right.
Dale is such a giver of his expertise.
That's right.
And so many people are like that, where you make a phone call and the guy very easily could have been like, hey, leave me alone,
dude. Get lost, dude.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not taking my business. And I say this all the time. It's God's economy. There's enough money for everybody to have some.
Yeah.
If we just share. And thankfully, Justin shared. And I told him, I said, I've got from a previous life a gold mine in Destin, Florida that I would like to try this out on. That worked into, we ran the Arkansas Golf Trail, we ran the Missouri Golf Trail, and then we had the Panhandle in Destin, Florida. I was running Golf Trail, and I was doing it on the side. We had a website you could book online, but then the phone started to ring.
Yeah.
And my phone was ringing while I was in class.
And you're like, what's going on?
And I'm like, hey, wait a minute, this might have legs. And then we got connected with Wyndham Hotels, and we started doing bookings for them. And I realized then that my passion and my entrepreneurship had come together.
Yeah.
And so I took the leap of faith. Christy took the leap with me. And we started at the time what was called Executive Golf Packages.
Yeah. Now, tell me your very first like big, which for people listening, everyone knows this. When you're teaching, you're not making a lot of money.
No.
Take me back to like your very first big sale. What was going through your mind?
So it wasn't even big.
Exactly. That's what's so funny. When we say big sale,
it wasn't even big. It was just, I can take you to my first sale. That was online.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of clicked to me like, oh man, this is working. Like, the phone would ring, and we had a vanity 855 number.
Yeah.
And of course the bots would call and man, whatever, but I'll never forget the first online booking.
Yeah.
and it was for the Arkansas Golf Trail.
Yeah.
And there were 4 guys that booked to go to Glenwood, Arkansas, and play the country club down there. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I've never even met these guys. I don't know who they are. And I called them right away. And
they bought online.
They bought online.
And you never talked to them.
I never talked to them.
This is wild.
And so I called them and I was
Yeah.
like, hey, we received your reservation.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we've got your tee times ready. He was like, man, that was fast. I can't believe you called that fast. And, played it all. I didn't want to say, you're my first guy.
Yeah. They're thinking great customer service and you're thinking like, you're my first online.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I remember that. But the first big sale was we operated Executive Golf for a full year and almost a year and a half. And then we started dabbling with the Masters. And that was a leap of faith. We found out how we could do it. We leased a CRJ 200, which is a 50-seat aircraft. And we had the lease out. We spent every penny we had on this aircraft, and now we had to go sell it.
Talking about risky.
It was a huge risk.
Yeah.
Huge risk. And in hindsight, and as part of the story, we've quit doing that now because of the amount of risk. But I'll never forget the first big sale was somebody, again, online.
Yeah.
They saw I would post about it on various golf forums and things online. Somebody saw the link, went to our website, and bought 10 seats online. And I was like, holy cow, this is real.
Yeah.
Like,
Pinch
now
me.
we've
Yeah.
sold 10.
Yeah.
So now okay, what are we going to do? Sell the other 40. It was kind of a catch-22.
What was like the average like ticket price? Like somebody bought 10.
Back then, it was $1,500 a seat.
So yeah, a 15K order comes in.
15K order,
Yeah.
bam, right away. I'm like, whew,
Yeah, which,
okay.
I don't know what you were making as when I was a teacher, this was back in 2010, I think I was making like 40K a year or 45K a year.
It was very close to a third of my salary.
Yeah, yeah. And so overnight you get, talk about an eye-opening.
Yeah,
like
it was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, not only did we get this sale, but okay, now we're really going to the Masters. And
yeah.
And look, I had that stigma. People were like, you're not taking people to the Masters. Again, that gambler in me was, yes, we are. We're going to do it. I've found a way to do this, and we're going to do it. People didn't believe that we could do it, but we did. We took 50 people over. We sold out the entire aircraft. We took 50 people over on a Tuesday, there and back from Northwest Arkansas.
You know what I love about that, too? I've learned this in entrepreneurship that, you only need 50.
Right.
But there are hundreds of people who are like, no, that's never going to. Because they don't have like an entrepreneurial mindset. They've never worked. They've only worked for someone else. And but for people listening, if you have a 9 to 5, I'm not knocking you. But I think that's one thing that's a bit jarring when you start a business is the amount of doubt that people freely give you when you didn't even ask.
Sure.
You didn't even invite the opinion. And people are like, well, I watched Shark Tank and you really gotta,
right.
Yeah.
It's harder to get an interview on Shark Tank than it is to sell 50 tickets to the Masters. How about that?
That's right. That's right.
Sometimes you just have to go and do.
Mm-hmm.
What's the phrase? You only fail if you quit.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm kind of a model of that now today.
Mm-hmm.
Executive golf packages didn't make it.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about that because you told me the story last time we got together about COVID happening.
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole premise of your business, like going on these trips, like suddenly everything's shut down. You can't, there's restrictions around it. Like what I was gonna say, what did that feel like? You'd probably be like, well, bad. It was
gut-wrenching.
But,
we go from 2017, we ended Executive Golf Packages, rebranded into Dream It Professional Events, got into the incentive space, corporate incentive trips, winner circles, president's clubs, whatever you want to call them, celebrating top performers and rewarding top customers. And by the time we got that rolling, it was 2019, 2020, we're set for a record year. It was incredible. Had over $2 million in total revenue booked. And on Friday, March 13th of 2020, it all came crashing down. I'll never forget it. I was sitting at Springdale Country Club and I got back to back to back to back phone calls. Every one of them was a cancel. It wasn't, we're going to reconsider. We don't know it was, no, we're done. Refund the money. We're not going. It's like, wow. Okay. And I was numb. I didn't know what to do. Nobody really knew what was going on at the time anyway. There was a lot of panic.
Did you have, I mean, do you get to a point where you're doing so much in revenue that, like, I think about my customers, I have like customers I don't know too well, who it's a pretty like rigid contract. Oh, there's that. It's a pretty rigid contract. And then I have one customer who it's such a great relationship that it's a handshake deal, basically.
Right.
And so I know for me, I would probably get to a point where I'd probably be like, well, normally I'd have like a contract, maybe like a non-refundable deposit or things like that. But I assume you probably eventually get to the point where you're just like, yeah, we'll work it out. And then something like COVID happens and it's like, well, shoot, maybe I never collected that deposit, or maybe I didn't, maybe they have the right to ask for it back, or.
Yeah. It was an act of God is what it clarified under. We have to do contracts because in 90% of, I say, I don't always do a contract, but in 90% of what we do a contract because we're partnered with a hotel.
Yeah.
So if you're going to the Masters and you need a contract, we'll get you one, right? If you're going to Kentucky Derby, you need a contract, I'll get you one. But if you're going to Jamaica, the Bahamas, anywhere in the Caribbean, and you're doing the all-inclusive thing, you're taking hundreds of people on the trip, we have to do a contract because the hotel wants a contract, right? They want to guarantee it too, and it protects us. We're going out of the country.
Yeah.
All kinds of things can happen. A lot of people don't think about that when they plan their own incentives internally. They don't have that contract with the hotel to protect them. They just call, I'll just book these rooms online and we can do that. I'm a member here. Secrets and Sandals, people are famous for that. No knock if you have memberships there, but don't use your membership to book your company to go on a company trip. You're going to get points and rewards, but you can do that once you get there. You can always ask for that. That's an insider tip for today. That's free.
So you were numb. I mean, how did you keep it together?
I don't know. To this day, well, my faith in God is the only way I made it through. I did nothing for 8 months, just hoping that it would come back. I ended up having no income for 18 months. I took some side jobs through the grace of God and LinkedIn. I was introduced to a guy named Jeff Underwood. I started a podcast, and Jeff was on my podcast, and I thought, I'm going to get him as a client, him and his company as a client coming out of COVID. And lo and behold, Jeff left that company and contacted me and came to Northwest Arkansas, came to meet me face to face to tell me what he was doing. And it introduced me to my second business in the payments processing world.
In hindsight, no one could predict COVID, but in hindsight, would you have done anything differently to it's kind of silly to say better prepare yourself for a worldwide pandemic, but
I probably would have. I wouldn't have changed a thing because we made it and I'm okay. If we went through it again, prior to, we were talking before we started recording about, cash flow and putting cash into future investments and then getting that payroll and that coming back later. I would have maybe set a little bit more aside because, again, I went for 18 months without a paycheck.
Yeah.
We depleted almost all of our savings.
Oh, yeah.
And so I maybe would have set a little bit more back. But, I tell people this all the time too. It's just money. And you don't really have a problem if money can fix it. And so that was our only problem. And I found other ways to go make money here and there, on the side. I was flipping things. You could go to Walmart and buy swimming pools, and I was making $500 a swimming pool. Believe it? On a $50 swimming pool, they were going for like $500 because you couldn't find them. So I fed my entrepreneur spirit a little bit, but I really probably wouldn't have done anything differently.
I remember.
And looking backwards, man, it's a straight line when I look back how God had it planned for me.
Yeah. It feels like this.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
It feels like you're all over the place.
Oh, it was everywhere.
But in retrospect, and I think this is also funny when we talk about entrepreneurship, how you end up doing things that make sense, but you never would have thought you would do it 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
I just think about the things I do now are from skill sets like that I was, crafting and developing as a teacher So it was a different context, but the skill. So looking back, it is a straight line. It's like, oh yeah, of course I can see how I got here.
Right.
But when you're going through it, you know.
Like I said, I started a podcast. I had nothing else to do. I was used to traveling all the time. That was shut down. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll start this podcast that Tim Rowe had been telling me to start for forever. I was like, I got nothing else to do. I'll start it. Had Jesse Cole on with the Savannah Bananas, had Jimmy Dykes from ESPN on. And I was like, okay, I've kind of gone to the top really quick. But again, looking back, Del Dupree was on the show. Jeff Underwood was on the show. Brian Sexton was on the show. Michael Ray was on the show. I just spent a week with Michael Ray in Louisville.
I've never met him. I see him on LinkedIn all the time.
Incredible guy.
Great smile.
Oh, my gosh. A brother from another mother, literally.
Yeah, great guy.
I love that guy. But, I look back and all of those people played a vital portion in the steps to where I am today now.
Yeah. Now, your wife along the way, I mean, has she become kind of like an entrepreneur herself, or...
No, I mean, she's fully devoted to education. So in all of that chaos, in April of 2020, she accepted a new job in education. She was the assistant principal at local junior high, and she accepted principal position at local elementary school. That was all during COVID. So we had that going on too. There was a lot of stress in the decision making and so forth. But no, and God bless her, she is heads down in education. We have 3 of our own kids, and we have 520 something of everybody else's kids, and she really does. I mean, she loves those kids.
Are your kids entrepreneurial?
My oldest one is. The twins probably will be. I can kind of see it. They're all 3 smarter than I am, which scares me. Not only because they're smarter than me, but because I can see the potential in them.
Yeah.
My oldest one is very entrepreneurial. Yeah.
Yeah. Has he asked you about like starting a business or running a business?
Oh, he loves working for me. He wants to, in the payments processing world, he wants to go out and install terminals. He doesn't like the sales part, but he likes the techie part of it. He wants to do the
Do you think he'll learn to like, I mean, interrupt you. Do you think he'll learn to like the sales part? Because I've learned that a lot of people, this is myself at least, and a lot of like the more entrepreneurial groups that I do, people, when they say they don't like sales, they say it because what they envision is the pushy,
the old used car sales.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And they don't understand that like sales done correctly actually feels pretty good.
That's right.
So
it's
I wonder,
relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. So I wonder if he will come around or if it'll just be like, no, I'm good.
and that's where he's at. And he's going to be a pilot. And let's go ahead and put the stereotypes of pilots on there, right? Pilots only talk to pilots and aircraft controllers. And so that feeling of really talking to people and building those relationships, he's a great kid. He's a great young man. We've been very blessed with him. I think he'll get it the more mature he becomes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Right now he thinks, oh, I don't want to go sell that. I gotta walk in the door and talk him into this machine now.
Yeah. Well, one thing we both appreciate sales. I think you and I, we appreciate smart sales. And for our listeners, when I think of smart sales, the way I define it is, honestly, the easiest way I define it is basically doing sales in a way that not everyone else. I mean, everyone else is sending like the template email. Everyone else is sending out, we're both on LinkedIn. So we're getting
this email finds you well.
Yeah. Yeah. That thing, the DM on LinkedIn, hey, I love what you're doing, but they have no idea what you're doing.
Right.
Or I had and also like just the people who are doing so many like DMs at scale that they don't even really know what you do. I was on a sales call the other day. Someone was selling me a podcast service. And he was like, well, hey, how are things in the real estate world? And I was like, I don't know. I guess they're, why do you ask? He's like, well, because you sell real estate, right? And I was like, no. Like, I was like, dude, you asked me on the sales call and you don't even know. Like, it was kind of a jarring disconnect. I was like, how did you get here?
Right.
But I think when we talk about smart sales, it's basically just like, I just don't do what everyone else does. And
it's being different, and that's what I love about my part of the entrepreneurship is that, Dream It was based selfishly on my bucket list and helping other people reward their top performers with their bucket list, right? And so that's doing things differently already. People do the cookie cutter. It drives me nuts that people think that buying lunch for the office is an incentive. We eat lunch every day, right? Now you're making them stay in the office. It's not really fun, and if you think, well, we're giving them a meal that they don't have to pay for, well, then you're not paying them enough. That's a harsh reality.
Yeah.
But I like to do things that are different. Have you ever thought about taking your whole team to the Kentucky Derby or to the Masters or to Cabo?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
Here's what's really interesting about that, though. I think some bosses are so detached from even thinking about that.
Of what's out there.
Yeah. And so here's the way I think of it is, like, you talk about taking your team to Cabo. I know there's people listening who are probably like, I could never imagine working for a company where they would do that. But my brother-in-law works for a company out of Wichita, Kansas. And every year they take the entire team, it's like 100 people, to an all-inclusive resort in the Caribbean. I need to connect them with you.
I need to know your brother-in-law.
Actually, you might even be a good person to connect with. And it's just so funny to me because it's like 4 or 5 days. And we were talking the first year he went on that trip. I was like, dude, so what's it like? And he was like, it's awesome. Like, you just show up, get on the flight, you go down there, and the company covers that.
That's
for the
right.
whole.
Sure.
And here's what's funny to me is I think people, they hear those stories and they think they're like made up, or it's like from ChatGPT. That doesn't actually happen until they actually meet a company where it does happen. And now suddenly they're like, oh, wow, this is actually.
It's one of the best retention tools that a company could ever use, is because it gives genuine reward and recognition.
Yeah.
Right. You take them there and you can do the cookie cutter where, hey, we've got to have a meeting and, you need to be at this dinner and this breakfast at this time, or you can just take them and let them be.
Yeah.
And, I posted this week on LinkedIn. Imagine yourself in this swimming pool.
That's right. I saw that.
With a swim up bar,
Yeah.
right? And the pool was empty. And I took the picture with this in mind, but imagine yourself there.
Yeah.
And imagine the conversations that are going to take place because you're out of the office. You're working with people you normally only see on a Zoom or Teams, whatever video conferencing you're using. But most importantly, your significant other is there with you.
That's what my brother-in-law's company does. They take the spouse.
That's right.
Too.
You have to. You have to. People say, well, we can't afford it. Well, you can't afford not to have that significant other at the house. Christy, I'm gone all week this week. Again, I know it's testing week at the school, but it's the first week of April and I'm gone. I'm at the Masters and then I'm in Little Rock with a client. And she says, go do it, because she knows that she's going to Cabo with me and she's going to Dominican with me. And not because I own the company, but because I blessed and I have the unique story that I qualified.
Yeah.
And so she knew she got to go with me.
Yeah.
And when they know that they get to go, then that dinner, that late night dinner with a client or the out of town travel for 2 days isn't as big of a problem.
Does it get under your skin, or does it, like, what goes through your mind when someone says, I can't afford that?
They just haven't considered it. I mean, it's just an objection. They're not serious about looking into it. You can't afford it because an effective incentive program pays for itself.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing here, right? Your top is always going to be your top. And your bottom is always going to be your bottom. We'll talk about them later, but why are they still around? Okay. And where you're going to make the money is moving that middle 60 to 70%. Let's set a goal. I want you to do, let's just use numbers here. I want you to do 50 deals this year. Okay. Well, everybody that does 50, boom, we're going. So we got 50 people. They've hit 50 deals and they're all going. What about the guy that did 40? Well, he didn't qualify. He didn't get to go. Yeah, but how much revenue did he just generate for you this year? What about the guy that did 42, 43, or the guy that normally does 12 and got to 30? He more than doubled his revenue and the number of deals that he did. No, you're not taking him. Maybe you do because he just increased that much, but look what he did for your bottom line. An effective program will pay for itself easily.
It's weird to me too. I feel bad for like HR departments where they're tasked by their owners to like show recognition and, appreciate their employees.
Yeah.
But they aren't given like the actual
funds. Yeah.
Like I had a woman call me one time. This was pre-COVID, probably like 2018, 2017. She called me 2018. She called me and said, hey, I'm trying to plan like an end of the year thing for our entire team. It's 200 employees. They've increased revenue by whatever percent it was. I'm looking for some ideas.
Yeah.
And I don't know how she got my contact. I do a lot in like the leadership space. That's probably how she got a hold of me. And I said, okay, well, what's your budget? And she said, my budget is about $150. And I was like, you don't even have the budget for a pizza party.
Right.
Which is already like the made fun of, like,
sure.
Seriously, you did a pizza party?
Absolutely.
And I feel bad. I see this all the time because I'm still like a member in like a variety of like HR groups on Facebook. I see the post all the time, like these people who they want to appreciate their team members. And it's like, hey, I want to do it, but I have a shoestring budget. I don't actually have the money to do it.
Yeah.
But then occasionally you come across a business like the one that we're talking about where they're like, yeah, I'm going to pay for the trip.
Sure.
I'm going to invest in my team.
And again, it's just exploring, but it goes back to how do you sell that, right? And you got to sell it differently. I can't just go into somebody and say, hey, you should consider doing an incentive trip. So instead, I sent a guy a sand bottle one time. A little bitty bottle, filled it full of sand. I sent it to him. I said, when you get this, I want you to call or email me. But don't just call or email me because you got the bottle. I want you to sprinkle it all on the floor, take your shoes off, and put your feet in the sand. He was like, he called me. He said, what in the heck is this? I said, you got your feet in the sand? He said, well, not really. I said, no, I want you to put your feet in the sand. Now, I want you to imagine that everybody on your team has their feet in the sand with you.
Mm-hmm.
They do a trip every year now because it took being different to get them to think different, right?
You know what I like about that story too? I think another objection people give in the sales process is, I don't have the time or money to compete with like these bigger brands. But like, think about what did that bottle of sand cost you?
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
I mean, all in at $9.95 to ship it, right? Like crazy. And you can spend crazy money if you want to, or you can, Del Dupree will tell you, spend 50 cents on a piece of paper and a stamp.
That's right.
Wad it up, crumple it all up, and send it to them. I can't tell you how much business I've gotten, how many conversations I've had, the relationships start to build connection just because of a crumpled letter.
And it's funny how being different, like again, different doesn't mean expensive, but I think I've just learned that, and maybe people aren't very honest with themselves, because I think about the business owner who's like, hey, I really want to appreciate my team. Oh, but we can only do a pizza party.
Yeah.
I wonder like, well, how honest are you being with yourself? But also in the sales world, I think most salespeople would say, I want to stand out. I want to be different. I don't want to be like those other people.
Right.
But then they get on a sales call. They say your name wrong. They say, hey, Ben, they don't even get like the basic details right.
Right.
And you kind of wonder, like, it's almost like people aren't either self-aware or honest with themselves enough to realize like, hey, being different, it may not be expensive, but it does take work.
It takes work.
It takes intentionality.
Yeah, you said it. You have to be intentional about what you're doing. And then, a lot of employees or employers don't ever ask their employees either.
Mm-hmm.
They just think, well, God, we don't have the money. We'll just do a pizza party, or we'll take them to the ball game. We can get a suite and they can come watch the ball game. Or here's another one of my favorites, man, that Saturday cookout. Because everybody wants to spend their weekend at the company cookout.
Yeah.
Right? That's just above the holiday party that everybody throws now.
Yeah.
And so have you ever asked what they want? Do you realize you could do this individually? It's going to take you more time.
Yeah.
But you could do it individually. Like, what do you really want right now? If you had a bonus, or if I could get you to get 10 more deals this month, what would you really want?
A week off with margaritas.
A week off with margaritas.
It's easy.
Got it.
I'm easy, man.
Right?
The beach is all I need.
That's it. And so now I go back and I look, okay, if Blake does 10 deals, what's that do to my bottom line, and what can I afford to write a check for to send him off?
And I think part of the excitement of this too is where it's not just where the boss says like, hey, go get your deals and you'll get this, but now like the boss or like the sales manager or whoever is now like there's like a shared excitement of like, dude, you're 2 away. Like, let's get together.
Yeah. How can I help you?
Yeah. And I feel like there's like a reciprocity there too, where like everyone's excited. And I would almost even imagine that for some of these larger teams, it's like, Derek over here has 48 deals. Man, he's 2 away. Like, how do we help him? Which again,
it's totally it. And I love competition. I'm as competitive as anybody you'll find.
Yeah.
And we often talk people out of doing the individual competitions. And now you're saying, well, yeah, because you want more people to go because you make more money. Well, yeah, but that's not the reason why we say do this. If you can create that team atmosphere and put a true scoreboard on the wall,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden as a company, we got to do 500 deals. Remember, your top's always going to be your top.
Yeah.
So Blake's always going to do 50. Brad's always going to be at the bottom. He's going to always do 20. He's never held. But the minute that I know that the team goal has to be reached, Blake starts reaching down to Brad, or Brad will even give up. Dude, I've done all I know how to do, but Blake is busting his tail over here. I'm going to go ask him if he needs help.
Yeah.
Because I see on the board we're at 480, and we got to get 20 more by the end of the month. How can I go help him? We see it all the time where people will reach out to help each other, and it's awesome. You can't go force a culture that creates. We call it the culture of achievement.
Do you feel like, or like, what's the solution for business owners who are struggling, like in the short term, in the sense of, like, can't get over price point of some kind of incentive program like this, and they don't see the long-term benefit? Like, I've noticed business owners, it's like, yeah, it cost you this much, but your team brought in 30% more deals.
Yeah.
Your bottom line revenue. Like, I was talking with a company actually a couple of years ago, and the owner, there was a remote team, a local remote team, 14, 15 employees. And he was about to do like a 2-week, I was like, how are things going? He's like, it's kind of a bummer time of my year, because this is the time that I go around to all my employees' offices, like their whole offices, and like inspect that they're doing what they should be doing.
Right.
Which just sounds awful.
No. Here comes that. I live in that world. Here comes the principal. Oh, no.
Yeah. And so I'm like, so you go into their homes? He's like, yeah, I go and just make sure everything's like, because my team needs to be efficient and stuff. And I was like, okay, well, how long does it take you to do all this? And he's like, well, to go to every house, it's about 2 weeks of work. He's the owner of the business. And I was like, so how's revenue? Like, what's going on? He's like, oh, it's great. Like, we've tripled in the last year. Wow. And I was like, and the joke he made was, he was like, I don't know if one of my employees is like on a call with like not wearing any pants. And I was like, dude, if they've tripled your revenue, I'd be like, man, you go for it.
No pants.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. The pants are a curse. Don't put them on. But it's funny to me how like the short term though is, oh, I got to get after I got to inspect, I got to whatever, instead of understanding the long term.
Right.
And it feels like that trade-off is always in tension.
I would have to look it up. I think it was 2017. But the Dallas Mavericks, it was the last time prior to now, if they might win it now. I don't follow the NBA much, but the Dallas Mavericks, the last time they won the world championship in the NBA, there was a group that did a study, and the Mavericks gave more high fives on the floor than any other team in the NBA. And I tell people all the time, this is the easiest thing you can do as an incentive, is go giving high fives, whether it's proverbial, or if you're really in the office, go freaking give them a high five. Praise your people in public, in front of everybody. And if they do something wrong, pull them aside.
That's right.
Don't do it in front of everybody.
That's right. And people get it backwards. They correct publicly
all the time,
because they think that it's like a show of like.
Yeah, they think everybody will learn from it.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Everybody learns from the praise.
That's right.
Right? It's positive reinforcement.
That's right.
Here's the thing. It's free. In the short term, it's free. It costs you nothing.
Yep.
So start there and then see, like you said, the longevity. Look at the long term, what that's going to pay out. And it'll happen. It got the Dallas Mavericks a world championship. So start giving high fives. But yeah, if you want to crunch numbers, it really is as easy as X equals Y, right?
It's that simple.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do I have to do to make X equal Y?
Yeah. Brad, we're out of time. It flew by,
I talk a lot.
I know, it's great. It's good. So I got 2 questions. We didn't get into your second business, the payments processing business.
Yep.
But for somebody listening, obviously you're a long-term entrepreneur. You're a savvy business owner. I think for people who want to follow up with you on either one of those businesses, what's the best way for someone to reach out, to talk to you, maybe even just get you don't drink coffee, but to sit down and just have a conversation in a coffee shop with you.
Sure.
Like what does all that look like?
So my phone number is posted everywhere on the World Wide Web. Just don't text me and say, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Or your number was in my phone. And who is this?
Yeah.
Because you're going to get my generated spam text reply right back. But my phone number is 479-466-6907. You can call me. You can text me. You can whatever. Find me on LinkedIn. at Brad Norwood. My social media on Facebook and there's a little bit of Instagram. It's at Dream It Pro. But text or call me is the easiest way to get a hold of me, or LinkedIn. But it's 479-466-6907.
Okay. And we'll put all that contact info. We won't put the number in the description for our listeners, but we'll have the LinkedIn profile and the contact on there as well.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want to add to your spam.
Listen,
but at this point, maybe it's so far gone. So.
It's so far gone. It's easy. But no, listen, call me, text me, reach out, send me a DM.
Yeah.
I'd love to just sit down with you. I don't drink coffee, but I will have water while you have a coffee. Or if it's later in the afternoon, I'll share a beer with you.
Yeah.
Just love to have conversation.
Yeah. Well, Brad, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, man. Enjoy it.
Yeah. Hey, for our listeners, you're listening to the podcast and you're thinking, man, this is pretty good stuff. And you're a first-time listener. What the heck you waiting on? Click the subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are. And don't forget, if you ever want to advertise on the podcast, you can always reach out, Blake at goodadvicecoaching.com, or you can support the podcast for as little as the price of a cup of coffee, which could be anything these days. But it's actually only $5 a month. That's on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. Thank you to all of our supporters of the podcast, and thank you so much for listening. That's today's good advice. We'll catch you later. See ya.